"Deesh, if she plays the harp, I'll clean the hall," laughed the king, but the humiliated peasant shone like a star. The great hall of Pedrovale Castle was magnificently decorated for the autumn banquet. Golden tapestries hung from the stone walls, and hundreds of candles illuminated the space in a warm, dancing glow. It was the annual celebration where King Aldrich received nobles from neighboring kingdoms. Among the servants rushing through the corridors was Liana, a 22-year-old young woman with hands calloused from scrubbing the castle's marble floors. Orphaned since age 12, she had worked in the castle for a decade, always invisible to the nobility's eyes. On that fateful night, while Liana scrubbed the floor near the hall entrance, carrying her heavy bucket of dirty water, King Aldrich appeared accompanied by his retinue. He was a robust 40-year-old man, known as much for his cruelty as for his vanity. "Your Majesty." Liana tried to move away quickly, but the bucket slipped from her trembling hands, spilling water on the king's velvet shoes. Silence took over the corridor. The king's face turned red with fury. "You filthy peasant," he shouted, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "Look, everyone, this miserable creature thinks she can touch royalty." The nobles around him began to laugh. Lady Morgana, the king's cousin known for her sharp tongue, approached with a cruel smile. "Perhaps she wants to join the banquet, Your Majesty. After all, even rats dream of crumbs." The king roared with laughter, a wicked idea forming in his mind. He noticed the golden harp being carried to the main hall. "Ah, I have a better idea," exclaimed Aldrich, his eyes gleaming with malice. "They say every peasant dreams of being noble. Let's give this one a chance." He grabbed Liana by the arm, dragging her to the center of the hall, where all the guests were already gathered. More than 200 nobles turned to watch the scene. "Noble lords and ladies," the king announced loudly, "this filthy servant has wet your king's feet. As punishment, or rather as entertainment, she shall have the honor of entertaining us." He pointed to the golden harp in the center of the hall. "If she plays the harp, I'll clean the hall," laughed the king, provoking general laughter. "Come, peasant, show us your noble talents. Play for us." Liana, her face burning with humiliation, looked at the instrument. Her torn and dirty clothes contrasted brutally with the silk and velvet gowns around her. I don't know how to play, Your Majesty," she murmured. "You don't?" The king feigned surprise. "But every noble lady knows how to play the harp." "Oh, but I forgot. You're nothing but a sewer rat." The laughter increased. Some nobles began throwing food at her. A piece of bread hit her face, leaving a sauce stain on her cheek. "Play," ordered the king, "or you'll spend the night in the dungeon." With trembling hands, Liana approached the harp. What no one knew was that before becoming an orphan, before the Black Plague took her parents, she had been the daughter of one of the greatest music masters in the neighboring kingdom of Luminara. Her father, though a commoner, had been a court musician before being falsely accused of treason and fleeing with his family. For years in the castle, Liana had hidden her past and her talent. But sometimes, late at night, when the castle slept, she would sneak to the old abandoned music room in the East Tower, where an old dusty harp rested forgotten. There, alone under the moonlight, she played the melodies her father had taught her. Sitting before the golden harp, Liana closed her eyes for a moment. She could hear her father's voice. "Music, my daughter, is the language of the soul. Neither kings nor peasants can own it. It belongs only to those who honor it with truth in their hearts." Her hands touched the first strings. The sound that emerged was so pure, so crystalline, that the laughter in the hall began to die. Liana started with a simple melody, an ancient lullaby that peasant mothers sang to their children. But then her hands gained confidence, and the melody transformed. It was the elegy of ancient kings, an extremely complex composition that only the greatest masters could perform. The notes cascaded through the hall like crystal water, rising and falling in harmonies that seemed impossible for a single harp to create. The silence was now absolute. Not even the king dared breathe loudly. Liana didn't just play, she transformed the air around her. The music told a story, The story of kings who fell through their arrogance, of peasants who rose through their nobility of spirit. Her fingers danced across the strings with a speed and precision that defied comprehension. Lady Morgana dropped her wine goblet. The red liquid stained her sky-blue dress, but she didn't even notice. Then, as if the music weren't enough, Lyanna began to sing. Her voice, clear as the morning bell, strong as the sea storm, filled every corner of the hall. Where is the crown when the soul is empty? Where is the gold when the heart is cold? The true kingdom is not conquered with sword, but with the nobility that overflows from the soul. Among the guests was someone King Aldric didn't expect. Duke Sebastian of Luminara, disguised as a lesser noble. He had arrived secretly to investigate rumors about the whereabouts of his former music master's daughter. Upon hearing that specific melody, a composition that only Master Garrett and his daughter knew, the Duke could barely contain his emotion. It was her, the daughter of his beloved teacher, who had been unjustly accused years ago. But there was more. Duke Sebastian wasn't just any noble. He was known throughout all kingdoms as the judge of talents, responsible for choosing the artists who would perform at the Grand Festival of Kingdoms, an event that happened once every 5 years in the Empire's capital. Being chosen for the festival meant eternal fame and fortune. When Lyanna finished her performance, the silence continued for long seconds. Then a single person began to applaud. It was Duke Sebastian, who rose from his seat. "Magnificent!" he exclaimed, walking toward the center of the hall. "In my 50 years of life, I have never heard such a performance." King Aldric, recovering from shock, tried to regain control of the situation. "Who are you to—" "I am Duke Sebastian of Luminara." He removed his hood, revealing his well-known face. Gasps echoed through the hall. "And I declare, before all present, that this young woman has just executed the most perfect interpretation of the elegy of ancient kings I have ever witnessed." He turned to Lyanna, who was still seated at the harp, stunned. "Miss, you are Master Garrett's daughter, aren't you?" Lyanna's eyes widened, tears beginning to form. How do you know?" "Because only he could have taught someone to play like this. And because I recognize in you the same green eyes and the same gift that made your father legendary." Duke Sebastian turned to the assembled court, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. 12 years ago, Master Garrett was accused of treason in this very kingdom. He fled with his family, and it was later learned they died of plague. But what few know, he paused dramatically, is that I discovered 3 years ago proof that the accusations were false. Master Garrett was victim of a conspiracy because he refused to compose a war march for a noble who planned to usurp the throne. Murmurs ran through the hall. King Aldric paled slightly. "This noble," Sebastian continued, "died 5 years ago, taking the secret to his grave. But the documents proving Master Garrett's innocence are in my possession." He approached Lyanna, and, to everyone's shock, knelt before her. "Miss Lyanna, in the name of the Kingdom of Luminara, I ask forgiveness for what was done to your family. And more," he stood up, "I officially invite you to be the principal harpist of the Grand Festival of Kingdoms. It is a position that will guarantee not only fame and fortune, but also the title of Lady of Music, an honor equivalent to nobility." The hall exploded in conversation. King Aldric, red with rage and humiliation, slammed his fist on the table. "She is my servant. You cannot simply—" "With all due respect, Your Majesty," Sebastian interrupted, his voice now cold as steel, "Miss Lyanna is a free citizen. Keeping the daughter of an innocent man in servitude, well, that wouldn't look good when the story spreads through the kingdoms, don't you think?" Lyanna slowly rose from the harp. Her clothes were still dirty, food stains still marked her face, but there was something different about her now. A dignity that no humiliation could take away. "Duke Sebastian," she said, her clear voice echoing through the silent hall, "I thank you for your offer, but before I accept, I have something to say." She turned to King Aldric and his court. "For 10 years I served in this castle. I saw how nobles treat those they consider inferior. I saw cruelty disguised as humor, arrogance disguised as birthright. She walked a few steps, each movement graceful despite her humble clothes. Your Majesty said that if I played the harp, he would clean the hall. Well, I played, and I didn't just play. I showed that talent, art, true nobility doesn't come from blood or gold, but from the soul. Lady Morgana tried to speak, but Lyanna silenced her with a look. For years I hid who I was out of fear, but tonight your Majesty did me a favor. By trying to humiliate me, you freed me, because I realized that true humiliation isn't being poor or a servant. It's having power and using it to diminish others. She turned again to Duke Sebastian. I accept your offer, Your Grace, but with one condition. Sebastian raised an eyebrow, intrigued. I want to establish a music school in Luminara, a school where both nobles and commoners can learn together, where talent is the only admission criterion. The Duke smiled broadly. Consider it done, Lady Lyanna. It will be the Master Garrett School of Music in honor of your father. 6 months later, the grand Festival of Kingdoms was at its peak. Kings, queens, princes and princesses from 12 different kingdoms were gathered in the grand amphitheater of Luminara, a structure that held 5,000 people. Lyanna, now dressed in a stunning emerald green silk gown that matched her eyes, was backstage. Her hair, once always tied and dirty, fell in golden cascades over her shoulders. But more than the physical transformation, it was her presence that had changed. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew her own worth. Lady Lyanna, a young lord approached nervously. I wanted to wish you good luck. It was Lord Edmund, King Aldric's son. Unlike his father, he had always treated servants with kindness and had been horrified by the scene at the banquet. Thank you, Lord Edmund, but I don't need luck. I have something better, years of preparation and my father's memory. About that night, Edmund began, embarrassed. I want to apologize for my father's behavior. It was unforgivable. Lyanna studied him for a moment, then smiled gently. Your father acted as he always acted, but you, Lord Edmund, have the chance to be different. Use it wisely. The royal announcer called her name, and Lyanna walked onto the stage. The crowd fell silent upon seeing her. The story of the servant who became a lady had spread like fire through the kingdoms. In the royal box, she could see King Aldric, forced to attend by protocol. His face was a mask of bitterness. Beside him, Lady Morgana looked like she had swallowed something sour, but Lyanna didn't play for them. She played for the little girl in the 3rd row, whose eyes shone with admiration. She played for the servants, who had gotten permission to watch from the highest balconies. She played for the memory of her parents. The performance lasted an hour. Lyanna didn't just play the harp. She incorporated 3 different instruments, sang in 4 ancient languages, and told through music the story of overcoming and redemption. When the last notes died in the air, the silence lasted only a second before the amphitheater exploded in deafening applause. People stood up. Flowers were thrown onto the stage. And then something unprecedented happened. Empress Elena, the supreme ruler of the 12 kingdoms, rose from her throne and personally walked to the stage. Lady Lyanna, she said, her voice magically amplified so everyone could hear, you have not only honored the festival with your art, you have reminded us all of a fundamental truth. True nobility is not inherited. It is earned through our actions and talents. The Empress removed from her own neck a gold medallion with a star sapphire. This is the medallion of the Imperial Order of Arts. In 1,000 years of empire, it has been awarded only 12 times. You are the 13th to receive it, and the first of common origin. Tears ran down Lyanna's face as she bowed to receive the honor. The Master Garrett School of Music had become the most prestigious arts institution in the kingdoms. In its white marble corridors, children of kings studied alongside children of blacksmiths. The only criterion was talent and dedication. Liana, now 27 years old, walked through the school gardens, watching her students practice under the cherry blossoms. She had married Duke Sebastian, not the old duke who had discovered her, but his son, Alexander, a young composer who had fallen in love with her not for her fame, but for her passion for music and equality. "Master Liana," a small voice called her. It was Mira, an 8-year-old girl, daughter of a washerwoman. She had been discovered singing in the streets and brought to the school. "Yes, dear? Is it true that you were once a servant, that you cleaned the floor of a castle?" Liana knelt to be at the girl's height, smiling. "It's true, yes. For 10 years my hands knew the weight of the mop more than the harp strings. And how did you become this?" Mira gestured to the impressive school building, to the gardens, to everything Liana had achieved. "I never forgot who I was inside," Liana answered gently. "Even when others tried to tell me I was worthless, I kept my music in my heart, and when the right moment came, I let it shine." She touched the girl's face tenderly. "Remember, Mira, kings can take our titles, they can humiliate us, they can try to diminish us, but they cannot take our talents, our dreams, our essence. And sometimes," she winked, "the greatest revenge against those who try to humiliate us is simply showing the world what we're capable of." That afternoon, a royal carriage stopped at the school gates. From it descended Lord Edmund, now King Edmund after his father's death 2 years earlier. He had abolished many of his predecessors' cruel laws and was known as the Just King. "Lady Liana," he bowed respectfully, "I've come personally to invite you to be the royal advisor of arts and education. I want every child in the kingdom to have access to education, regardless of their origin." Liana smiled. The peasant who was once forced to humiliate herself was now consulted by kings. But more importantly, she had transformed her pain into purpose, her humiliation into strength to change the world. Upon accepting the position, she made only one demand, that in the great hall of Pedrovale Castle, where she was once humiliated, a plaque be installed with the words, "True nobility is not in the blood we inherit, but in the music we create, in the compassion we show, and in the courage to shine, even when the world tries to extinguish our light." And so, the story of the servant who cleaned the hall became legend. But more than a legend, it became a symbol that talent, dignity, and perseverance always triumph over arrogance and cruelty. Because in the end, King Aldrich was right about one thing. When Liana played the harp, he did indeed clean the hall, just not the way he expected. It was his tears of humiliation and regret that washed the floor that night, as he watched a simple peasant shine brighter than all the jewels in his crown. Sometimes the brightest stars are those that emerge from the deepest darkness, and sometimes the most powerful kings are humbled by the hands they once despised.